You're listening to Monday Matters, a Principal Matters podcast production.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. I'm back with my co-host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for a Monday Matters. Jen, this recording will be coming out in November, and what's things like up in beautiful Dublin, Ohio this time of year?
We've had a beautiful fall, beautiful fall. Very dry, kind of scary dry, but we've gotten some rain and some wind and some chilly temperatures. So definitely easing into November a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for those who are listening to this, we record these in batches. So Missy, my wife, and I just got back from upstate New York with some friends that you and I both have worked with, Sainties. So the wonderful principals across the state of New York.
Well, and Will, I have not told you this yet. Our listeners are probably like, what's happening? I just signed a contract to go to Long Island to work with some principals there with the new graduation requirements for New York. Ohio went through this a few years ago. And so, to shift from a assessment for graduation as opposed to much more of a holistic view, it's a big shift. So I'm going to go work with the principals up there in January.
Oh.
I sure wish it wasn't January, but Long Island in January will certainly test my heat fortitude, or lack of.
So memory lane. My father was in the Navy when I was in high school and was stationed in Brooklyn. So we lived on Long Island for part of my freshman year before his ship got sent down to Virginia Beach. So I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
Happy jealous. I'll be in the Fort Lauderdale area. So it'll be a little warmer in January. Working with my friends at the SAMS process, Mark Schellinger, who I, by the way, recorded with today, but listeners won't hear him probably until April. Man, Jen, I'm just going to speak to listeners right now. You guys who listen to this show regularly, thank you. And for our sponsors, thank you for the partnership with this program. It's so weird, Jen, because you are interviewing people. I'm interviewing people. I was looking today at our notes, and we've got people scheduled all the way through April of 2026, already recorded and ready to be released. So if anybody has a suggestion on ways we should do this differently. Sometimes I wonder, should we just go to a daily podcast? We have so much content, but I'm just grateful for your work and for all of our guests. I wanted to use this Monday Matters, though, to bring a conversation that the listeners won't hear, and probably until spring too. You had a great conversation recently with a friend about AI, and I want to bring that conversation here because you've been writing about AI in your newsletter, and I've been reading a lot about AI. And so let's talk about this, and just to bring listeners up to date with our conversations.
Right. I think we're all thinking about this, and I think it's important for any school leader to disentangle the conversations about AI that are real and happening in our classrooms and those that are brought to us by vendors. There's a lot of AI vendor conversations now, and that is all fine, well, and good, but we have to understand what our teachers are thinking and feeling. And so I kind of tried to get down into that, and I was starting to learn about it and starting to worry, as I do. And then I met Dr. John Spencer. And I know I've talked to you about him, Will. This is a gentleman I met we kind of co-presented, not together, but we had different content, but a conference out in Oregon. And this guy blew me away. And so, of course, I set up a podcast recording that our listeners will hear, I think, in March. So I have a lot to say, but I don't want to just take the mic, toss it back to you.
Well, I don't mind you
taking
the mic because you've been writing about this, and we may have to do more than one Monday Matters, but I'll set the stage for kind of globally, and then let's come back to the school. Recently, a friend of mine recommended a book that was written by an AI researcher who signed one of the open letters of concern. And his concern was that with the development of AI being unregulated as it is, what happens if the development of AI accelerates way beyond what you and I are seeing to the point where no AI researcher, no developer is even able to understand the language of AI and its development. There are some very, very smart people whose concern is that AI could eventually work into what they call super intelligence. And so I'm not a techie guy. So reading this book was a little bit of a deep dive for me into conversations that were over my head. But I will say this, subsequently, I also listened to a podcast called Acquired, and the hosts tell the story of famous companies and how they became as successful as they have. And they did a 3-part series over Google. And so, sorry, Jen, but this was like a 9-hour investment on my part. I did a lot of this listening, traveling, or on a trail that was boring enough I could put this in. And so, but they, in their part 3 of that Google series, they also do a deep dive into the development of AI. And as a consumer, as a layperson, as someone on the other side of it, I've got some big question marks about if we think that the ways that our world is operating now have been disrupted by the way we use technology or the development of social media. It's the tip of the iceberg in terms of disruption and possible. I don't want to overstate this by saying potential disasters that could be created with all of these things. So that's the global picture. You bring that back to schools where people are already in the midst of, we just want teaching and learning to be happening.
Right.
And now we have all these tools being introduced. The global picture is one thing, but in the practice of our day-to-day operations with kids and families, how do we face something that all of us are encountering for the first time?
Right. And I think teachers are worried. And I'm going to use high school English teachers as a sample here, not because they're the only ones that are worried about this. That's not true. But it's the most tangible example for someone who is not an English teacher to understand how this could affect English teachers. So it was a little bit of a serendipitous moment for me because right before I met Dr. John Spencer, our executive director of teaching and learning came to me and she said, our English teachers are very worried about cheating and about our students who, when given an assignment, will just plug it into ChatGPT, change a few words here and there and turn it in. And so we have to establish some sort of a punitive discipline ladder, for lack of a better word. And so I was thinking about that. And then I heard John Spencer talk about this, about cheating and about plagiarism and what that does actually mean in the age of AI. And he pointed out, and Google certainly confirms, that universities and schools who are taking a hard line on this and trying to catch plagiarism and catch cheaters are getting some backlash and are getting sued, and they're losing. Because, if a student is accused of cheating and then all of the residual effects of that, kicked out of this, kicked out of that, failing grades, if they're able to prove they did not in fact cheat, then that, of course, gets the university in trouble, but it also is wrong, right? It's wrong for a lot of reasons. And so Dr. Spencer's point was using AI detection tools are not a solution. And I dumped in my most, what I thought was my most perfectly honed paragraph of my dissertation into an AI detector. And it said that this was written by AI. Well, I know it wasn't because I wrote it.
Right.
But it fit the what AI trainers believed was good writing.
Yeah.
So that is to say that we can't count on AI detectors. And so I think what we have to do is we have to kind of change our mindsets. This is not 1980 where we can identify a paragraph copied from Encyclopedia Britannica and say you copied. That is not where we are anymore. And so we have to think differently. And I wrote about this in my newsletter, and I said, we can't take a sledgehammer of suspicion to this. We have to reconsider strategy.
Yeah, no, I read that in your newsletter, and I thought it was so thoughtful because you, as always, Jen, talk about, okay, in the nitty gritty of school, then what is this going to look like? And I think this is helpful for, so let's just talk about the practice
Right.
for a minute, because, you and I are both former English teachers. And when I think about the importance of teaching students how to think, teaching students how to communicate, teaching students how to speak, how to write, those are all of the goals around the craft of why language arts is so important. And if I was back in that classroom setting and of course, you and I are writers, so we do the craft all the time. Um, I think for me, the question is, how do I invite students into primary written or expressed conversations where the thinking and the writing and development begins by talking
Right.
or by taking a pen and writing down your thoughts so that you can create those things in their original format there. But by not introducing students to AI, we're robbing them of an opportunity to do what we've been doing for years already, Jen.
Right.
1994, when I was a brand new English teacher, we had a computer lab at our school that the school had invested lots of money in these little programs that were probably DOS run old, the square monitors. We would take my students in there and they would take the paper they had written in my class, they would type it in on this program and then push a button and it would tell them how many complex sentences they have, how many coordinating conjunctions they used, what did they misspell, and it would spit it out in a printer. They would get a copy and then they would go back and correct their writing. Well, why were we using that tool all those, eons ago? It's because we found a tool that could do what a teacher could do and help students do to help them modify and improve their writing. Well, AI is one of the best editing tools that's ever been created. If you can take a primary document and then begin to hone it. You suggested in your newsletter other ways that teachers could assess understanding. Talk a little bit about that as well.
Right. And this is again the English teacher in me, but I think it's important to remember writing is not the only measure of learning. We have big tools that we can use to measure to assess understanding. In the language arts world alone, we have reading, speaking, and listening. So, I teach at The Ohio State University, and I decided after the last semester, I'm not going to require the same papers anymore because I need to use these other tools. And so we're going to do more listening to one another. We're going to do more speaking to one another, small group, large group, all of that. And we're going to make sure that we are fluent and comprehending what we're reading by speaking and listening. And so, this is not new. This is not Jen being in any way cutting edge. But when I look at a writing prompt, if it's something that AI could do, I need to think what else could assess this. And ironically, AI can tell me that too. I can put into Gemini, this is the prompt I used to use as a paper. What else could I do to measure understanding or to measure deep thinking about this? And so the analogy I used is, let's not have AI start the game. Let's have AI sit on the bench and be ready to be called into the game as a tool. So I think we can do it. I think it's going to, I tell my own children this all the time. Writing is not going to be the massively valued skill probably that it was for a long time, but being able to talk to people, being able to navigate a complex set of prompts or conversations will be much more important.
Yeah. Oh, Jen, my mind's going so many ways. Maybe we should do a part two
Right.
on this because I've been doing a lot of reading. I'm going to mention the title of this book, although it sounds alarming, but it's called "If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies: Why Superhuman AI Would Kill Us All" by Eliza Yudkowsky and Nate Soares. And anyone in the AI world knows their names. I did not, but they are famous researchers in AI that have written their concerns. And there have been a lot of other people recently, even in the news last week, of another big list of high name scientists who are coming out and saying, hey, how do we create regulations around this? Because we have none. On the other side, there have been people like John Spencer who's really helping understand the practice of what this looks like. Also, this week when I was at the Saney's conference, Elena Winnick was presenting, and she's written a book called The Generative Age, and she's a technology director for a school district, and she has teams of students that she meets with regularly to help. She and them collaboratively are working on how to embrace technology in a way that keeps accelerating their own learning. And then they present to teachers and they present to board members, because the students already know more than always know more than we do about these things. And so there are some really productive ways that people are trying to embrace the unknown by figuring it out. And I know that we're only touching a piece of what this looks like, but I was going to ask you if you could tell this, as we wrap this conversation up, if you could tell the story of the conversation you had with your niece that you wrote about
Yeah.
that I thought was so touching.
I would love to talk about my niece, but also we have to talk about athletics as it relates to AI. I'm going to blow your mind today. But yeah, my niece, she's a teenager, and she said, "Oh, I just wish all AI would just go away." And I said, "Okay, tell me more about that." And she said, "It's so frustrating because some kids use it, some don't. Some teachers let us, some don't. Some students have it churn out a paper with citations, and then a kid right next to that student may spend hours on a paper, and their grade might be lower because it's not as well written because ChatGPT did it." She said it's confusing and I hate it. And so I was really saddened by that, but I also very much agree with her. It's confusing and I hate it, but we are going to have to not live in that. Like my 80-year-old mother said recently, she said, "I'm done learning. I'm done." And I said, "Mom, you can't be done learning." But that's the feeling of overwhelm that brings us to say, it's confusing. I hate it. I'm done. I don't want to do this. We really can't. So what we have to do is flip the switch and say what we're going to do about it. So that's our path forward.
Well, you're reminding me of a conversation that I had earlier today with someone else who will be on the show. And she said, well, it's so important as educators that we kind of keep that. It's the same side of the coin of cynicism, because we need to be critically looking at things. And on the other side of that coin is hope, that we don't lose hope for the outcomes that we want, the ideals that we want, the kinds of relationships that we want to build. You can do both at the same time, to think critically, but also embrace things in ways that help the moment that you're in get better. So Jen and I, neither one pretend that we're experts on technology or AI, but as you're having these conversations, I would love to invite your questions or your feedback. So please reach out to either one of us, Jen. And of course, any final thoughts on how can people stay connected with you in your newsletter?
Yes, can I tell my sports story real quick?
Please.
So my husband is an athletic director, you guys, very large high school, very athletically successful. He has started to put in, they're in playoffs now, all the teams are. He's started to put in stats of each team, and AI predicts a winner with reasons why. So my husband was showing me this, and here's the crazy thing. Last week, 4 out of 4, AI's been right. Tonight's a big playoff game. We're going to see if it's right a 5th time. But I said to my husband, okay, your job just changed. Because now coaches are going to need to look at AI predictions and think about if they're on the losing end, how to change that. So it's going to touch everything. And I tell that story for, high school principals. It's interesting.
And again, it opens up this, that's one example. Of the millions of examples that we're going to be embracing as we move forward in AI-generated voice, AI-generated video, AI-generated statistics, AI-generated gambling, you just fill in the gaps. That's right. And so as we continue to learn together, Principal Matters listeners, thank you for tuning in for this week's conversation. Check out Jen's newsletter for more. And how can they find that, Jen?
Yes, back to that. Find me on my website, jenschwanke.com, and you can subscribe to my newsletter. It's called Principal Problems with Dr. Jen. And thank you to I have hundreds of people who have signed up. It's so fun. Yeah, it's great. So thank you all.
Much. Well, and Principal Matters listeners, will put links in today's show notes and a link to Jen's newsletter. So thank you, Jen. And thank you, Principal Matters listeners, for checking in. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for doing what matters. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Monday Matters.